All right. Good morning. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining. I think we can go ahead and start. Before we begin our presentation, I would like to let everyone know that we are offering Spanish and American Sign Language interpretation today. I will read the instruction for joining the Spanish channel, and then one of our Spanish interpreters will read them in Spanish. Simultaneous interpretation is being provided. English speakers may need to select English as their language. If you're accessing Zoom from a computer, you can click the globe icon located at the bottom of the screen and then choose English. If you're accessing Zoom from your smartphone, please click the three dots above where it says More on the bottom right side of the screen and choose Language Interpretation, and then choose English. Make sure you press Done on the top right side of the screen.
Buenos días, gracias por acompañarnos. Les vamos a dar las instrucciones para acceder al canal de interpretación para poder escuchar esta presentación de manera simultánea al español. Le pedimos que si nos acompaña a través de una computadora, vaya a la parte inferior de la pantalla después de estas instrucciones, donde encontrará un símbolo de globo terráqueo. Ahí podrá apretarlo y verá el idioma español para seleccionar el canal. Si usted desea solamente escuchar una voz del intérprete, usted puede apagar el audio original y escuchará solo una voz. Si nos acompaña a través de un teléfono inteligente o tableta, o si no ve el globo terráqueo, oprima los tres botones, los tres puntos, perdón, donde dice More o más y desglose la lista para acceder lenguaje de interpretación o language interpretation y presione español. Puede apagar el audio original, pero muy importante en teléfono y tableta que presione done o terminado para activar la acción. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Next slide, please. Before we begin, I just want to ask if there are any technical issues. Is everyone able to hear me and see the slides? And also making sure Spanish and American Sign Language interpretation working. If you can give me thumbs up. Which actually I don't see participants, so thank you, Heidi. Great. Let's begin. Thank you again for joining us today. My name is Ava Yakubi Rod, and I'm an Air Resources Engineer at California Air Resources Board, or CARB. I'm joined by several of my great colleagues today to help facilitate this work group and present on various topics and to hear your thoughts and answer your questions. We would like to welcome you to our second funding plan work group for fiscal year 2025-26 for the Clean Mobility Investments, which includes the Clean Mobility Options Program, or CMO, Clean Mobility in Schools, or CMIS, Sustainable Transportation Equity Project, or STEP, and Planning and Capacity Building Program, or PCB. These projects are formally referred to in the state budgetary process as the Sustainable Community-Based Transportation Equity Project. The funding plan for clean transportation incentives serves as the annual blueprint for expending the clean transportation incentive funds appropriated to CARB in the state budget. The funding plan establishes CARB priorities for the funding cycle, describes the projects CARB intends to fund, and sets funding targets and outreach strategies for each project. Each year, the funding plan is updated and includes funding proposals and implementation details specific to each fiscal year. Next slide, please. Today's agenda builds on information provided in Workgroup 1 held on June 20th. We will kick off this presentation with a recap of what was presented and the feedback we received in our first work group. Next, we'll provide our efforts and resources available to communities to address specific challenges in implementing mobility projects, which that include technical assistance, collaboration, and networking efforts. Then we will shift our focus to CARB's research contracts and evaluation reports relevant to clean mobility projects. Next, we'll share our lessons learned around long-term sustainability challenges for these services and potential strategies to overcome these challenges. Then we present the mobility marketing plan, which intends to help grantees in marketing their projects to community leaders and decision makers. We'll then take a 10-minute break. That will be followed by a conversation on feedback received in the past few years on improvements that need to be made within our clean mobility investments. Then we will move to discussing some proposed policy changes and update on state budget and funding for clean transportation incentives. And as our last topic, we will provide you an update on long-term plan for mobility projects, and we'll then close with some next steps. Please note there will be a dedicated Q&A, question and answer portion after most agenda items, and then a general open Q&A at the end of the work group. This meeting is really meant to be a two-way conversation. We're here to present, but we're also here to listen, learn, and work together. Your perspectives, insights, and lived experiences are so valuable to us. We welcome your thoughts on everything we present today, whether it's a question, a suggestion, or a concern. You can either share them verbally or you're welcome to email it to us. We'll drop our contact info, the email address, in the chat as well. Now I'll pass it to my colleague Leilani to present a short recap of Workgroup 1 and the overview of current technical assistance efforts. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Ava. Hello, everyone. My name is Leilani Viramontes. I am an air pollution specialist at CARB, and I work on our clean mobility investments. To recap our previous work group on June 20th, the topics we covered were a background on CARB's light-duty vehicle incentive projects and the sustainable community-based transportation equity projects. We provided an overview of each of the mobility projects and discussed successes, challenges, and lessons learned for each project, and shared project user data and testimonials. We then discussed the proposed budget for fiscal year 2025-26 and asked attendees for input on future proposed funding allocations if we were to receive any funds later in the legislative process. Although the mobility projects have not been allocated funds this fiscal year, we still wanted to gather community input on how future funds should be allocated amongst the projects. We closed with a brief overview of the light-duty vehicle long-term strategy and an open Q&A session. Feedback received at this work group included attendees expressing interest in learning more about the grantee projects that were highlighted in the meeting, and wanting to learn more about coordination and strategies to address insurance issues and barriers to project implementation. Staff also received feedback on what to take into consideration for future funding splits, such as looking into how many applications we've received and noting that implementation funding opportunities can be more challenging to find than planning funding opportunities. The recording of that meeting is available on our website, which my colleague will drop the link in the chat to. Next slide, please. We'll now begin today's topics with an overview of the mobility project's technical assistance, collaboration, and networking efforts. Next slide, please. This slide provides a general overview of current technical assistance offered for the full suite of mobility projects. For pre- and post-application technical assistance, CARB and third-party administrators guide applicants in developing their applications, answer questions about grant requirements, and provide post-application technical assistance for non-awarded applicants. During the agreement execution and compliance phase, onboarding sessions help train grantees on program requirements, and grantees are supported by one-on-one assistance on insurance compliance and other program requirements with various templates and toolkits provided. During project implementation toolkits and guides are provided. Third-party administrators support technical expert networks and community support teams. CARB manages online grantee hubs and a case management system with one-on-one technical assistance. And on-site visits are conducted by CARB and administrators to connect with grantees in person and work through issues together. In addition, CARB's technical assistance efforts include networking opportunities that will be covered in the next few slides. Next slide, please. Led by the Shared Use Mobility Center, the Clean Mobility Equity Alliance is a peer learning, knowledge-sharing network that convenes clean mobility project implementers and partners, helping build collective capacity and reduce isolation across geographically and operationally diverse clean mobility projects. CEMIA's goals include supporting project implementation by establishing a space for participants to share challenges and lessons learned, and providing capacity building resources to members. CEMIA also creates a clean mobility equity community of practice and advances mobility justice policy solutions by identifying unique community needs and responsive policy approaches. Network activities include meetings and resources, such as events calendars and funding and policy trackers, communications, such as biweekly digest emails and a monthly newsletter, and the annual Clean Mobility Forum. Members range from nonprofit and community-based organizations, local and regional governments, tribal governments, and mobility operators and implementers. From 2020 to 2025, CEMIA has hosted 66 meetings and has had over 300 participants for the 28 meetings and working groups held in 2024. Next slide, please. Could I get the next slide, please? Oh, thank you. Expanding on the Clean Mobility Forum that was mentioned in the previous slide, the forum is an annual in-person event hosted by CEMIA that brings clean mobility project implementers and partners together to share stories, challenges, successes, and lessons learned in the clean shared mobility space. The forum's goals are to provide capacity-building learning opportunities to share best practices and lessons learned on a variety of topics and focus areas, and to provide networking, relationship building, and partnership development opportunities among CEMIA members, project implementers, service providers, researchers, and more. This year, CEMIA will be hosting the third annual forum in Fresno on October 2nd. Previous year's forums were in downtown Los Angeles and Pasadena. The forum has gathered over 200 attendees each year and offers panel sessions, breakout rooms, and networking sessions to engage and learn from. My colleague will drop the link in the chat to the forum webpage if you'd like to register for this year's forum and learn more. Next slide, please. Another collaboration and networking effort includes CARB's annual Clean Transportation Equity Incentives Symposium. The symposium is a hybrid event hosted by CARB to bring community members, stakeholders, and program administrators together for a bird's eye view of the clean transportation equity incentive programs. To date, CARB has hosted 3 symposiums held in Oakland, Sacramento, and most recently in Los Angeles on April 10th, 2025. Next year's symposium date and location are still to be determined. The symposium's goals are to reflect on CARB's light-duty equity incentive programs, network and partnership building, and to facilitate information sharing. Past sessions at the symposiums have discussed community outreach, lessons learned, data collection, and more. I'll now pass it over to my colleague Violet to present on clean mobility research and evaluation efforts. Thank you.
Thanks, Leilani. In the next few slides, I will provide a quick overview of CARB's clean mobility research and evaluation efforts. CARB has contracted with a range of universities and organizations to support our clean mobility programs in two main ways. First, we funded independent evaluation projects that look at both the overall impact of our statewide programs and more localized community scale efforts. These community level evaluations help us understand what's working on the ground and identify practices that could be applied in other communities. Second, we've partnered with several groups to provide technical assistance, both to help potential applicants prepare strong proposals and to support grantees as they implement their projects. The goals across both of these areas is to ensure our programs are equitable, effective, and responsive to community needs. This is really just a high-level summary. We've also placed information about these contracts and their findings on the CARB website, which we'll drop the link to in the chat. This slide gives a bit more detail on the organizations involved in this work. On the evaluation side, we've partnered with research institutions like UC Berkeley and Irvine, among others. They've evaluated large-scale projects like Clean Mobility Options and the Sustainable Transportation Equity Project, but also conducted in-depth case studies at the community level. That community scale lens is especially important for identifying lessons that can inform future projects across different contexts. On the technical assistance side, we're working with organizations like the Shared Use Mobility Center, the Institute for Local Government, and the Othering and Belonging Institute. SUMSI and CalSTART, as CMO program administrators, and ILG have provided support to applicants during the application process, helping them understand program requirements, strengthen their proposals, and navigate the submission process. SUMSI and OBI are also helping grantees with project implementation, offering coaching, peer learning opportunities, and other tools to support successful community-centered delivery. These partnerships are critical to helping us support participation from a broader range of communities and organizations, and to ensure clean mobility investments are successful in the long term. This study, led by the Shared Use Mobility Center, evaluated 24 transportation needs assessment projects, which were awarded up to $50,000 each between November of 2020 and May 2022. This evaluation is based on awardees' application materials, organization characteristics, post-award surveys, final reports, and data collected by the program administrator on the technical assistance provided. The report emphasizes that effective community engagement must go beyond outreach. It should prioritize trusted messengers, accessible communication formats, and long-term relationship building, especially for harder to reach populations. It's encouraging to see that all awardees reported high satisfaction with the technical assistance they received. Beyond that, feedback received from awardees demonstrates the program played a critical role in building local capacity, helping organizations assess transportation needs, engage their communities more meaningfully, and gather the foundational data needed to pursue future implementation funding. This capacity building is essential for long-term success and equity in clean mobility investment. You can find the full report on the CMO website with the link provided on the slide. This study, led by the Shared Use Mobility Center, evaluated first round of mobility projects awarded by the Clean Mobility Options Program. 2023 marks the first full operational year for mobility projects funded through Window 1. 7 of the 20 projects were launched between 2021 to 2023 and completed their first year of operation, which are evaluated in this report. Those projects are 5 microtransit services and 2 bike share projects. This report highlights meaningful progress in expanding clean mobility access across underserved communities. Over 110,000 clean mobility trips were provided to more than 6,000 users, demonstrating strong demand and impact. Notably, more than 70% of riders who were surveyed did not have access to a car, and 1 in 5 would not have made their trip without this service. These findings show that clean mobility is not just about emission reductions, but it's also about equity increasing access. However, programs also faced operational challenges, especially with insurance and low ridership during early launch phases. These barriers will be important to address as we scale and strengthen future efforts. CMO projects, the annual reports will continue to be published to capture progress in 2024, 2025, and so on. You can find that full report on the CMO website with the link provided on the slide. This study, led by the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley, Advancing Equitable Community-Based Transportation Planning, evaluated how CARB's needs assessment and planning capacity building efforts support equitable transportation planning and align with STEP and clean mobility goals. The team reviewed program materials, supported grantees through technical assistance, and conducted in-depth interviews with past awardees, unsuccessful applicants, community advocates, and state agency staff. Their focus was to better understand what inclusive equity-centered planning looks like and how programs can more effectively support it. Key findings included communities should lead efforts to identify transportation solutions, not have solutions imposed upon them. Success should reflect what matters to people, like safety, dignity, and access, not just quantitative metrics. And community voices should be included from the outset of evaluation and planning. These insights are already informing how CARB approaches equity in future planning and evaluation efforts. The team's findings and recommendations are shared across 3 publicly available reports. CARB contracted with STEER to research sustainable financing strategies for mobility solutions. The STEER report explores how underserved communities can better access clean transportation by identifying financial barriers and recommending tools to improve funding and affordability. STEER's research covered all 3 mobility project types. Key findings were as follows. There is no one-size-fits-all financing approach. Clean mobility programs require flexible funding models tailored to each community's needs and capacity. Ongoing subsidies and self-sustaining models each have trade-offs. Long-term success depends on realistic planning for financial viability. Lastly, community involvement is essential. Successful programs build trust and effectiveness by partnering with community-based organizations from the start. You can access the STEER white paper and policy brief at the links on the slide. We'll talk more about this report as well in the later part of the presentation when we discuss financial sustainability. So beginning in 2020, CARB contracted UC Berkeley's Transportation Sustainable Research Center to evaluate outcomes, lessons learned, and develop policy recommendations from CMO and STEP. The research team focused on equity, community impact, and long-term sustainability while examining 4 CMO projects, 3 STEP projects, and evaluating the CMO administrator team. UC Berkeley finished their reporting in spring of 2025. UC Berkeley's key findings were mobility projects reduce emissions and improve transportation access for priority populations. For example, one project's users reported an 88% faster travel times and a 67% increase in travel ranges. EV car sharing requires user onboarding and driver training for a positive experience. The research team found cross-cutting ways to streamline delivery of grant program, administration, and community impact. And the team also found that community partnerships were essential, but grantees needed more time and support to build trust and deliver meaningful engagement. The final report is available to view on this slide's link. I believe we'll drop that in the chat as well. CARB has a contract with UC Irvine to evaluate an an activity and accessibility-based framework for mobility equity. The goal of the research is to improve quantification of the benefits of coordinated place-based transportation investments across CMIS, CMO, STEP, and planning and capacity building projects. Current tools don't adequately quantify the added equity and access benefits of CARB's coordinated place-based mobility investments. This is that issue motivated. This is the issue that motivated this research contract. UC Irvine's approach is to model the increased access to destinations across the community when links are added between modal networks. The research will measure how many more destinations become accessible with coordinated investments in a project community. These investments could include improved sidewalks and bikeways leading to a transit plaza. The research is ongoing, so we expect the report to be completed in December of 2025. This work was led by the Institute for Local Governments and focused on providing technical assistance to applicants for the planning capacity building, CMIS, and STEP combined solicitation, both during and after the application process. The goal was to help communities navigate the process and identify opportunities to strengthen support structures for applicants. Key takeaways from their work include start application support earlier and make it more widely available. Many applicants need help identifying and connecting with the right partners. Continue the two-phase application approach for CMIS and STEP, but simplify the instructions and forms to reduce confusion. For planning, however, it was recommended that the two-phase approach be eliminated to ease the burden on lower capacity organizations. And consider offering separate RFAs for different project types to better focus project scopes and streamline solicitation documents. Their final report detailed recommendations on how to improve accessibility, clarity, and support for future applicants. And we're using those insights to inform the design of upcoming solicitations. And with that, we'll open the meeting up for any questions or comments you may have on the presentation thus far. Thank you.
Thank you, Violet. My name is Robert Chester. I'm staff here at CARB. I'll be leading the comments and questions period for this section of the presentation. If you would like to make a verbal comment or ask a question, please raise your hand. For those using Zoom online, please click on the raise hand option on the Zoom navigation bar under the Participants tab. If you are using an updated version of Zoom, you may need to click on the React or Reactions option on the Zoom navigation bar and then click on Raise Hand. For those using Zoom on mobile application, please click on the Raise Hand option in the Quote More tab. If you are using an updated version of Zoom mobily, you may need to click on the React or Reactions option on the Zoom navigation bar and then click on Raise Hand. If you are joining by phone, please press #2 to raise your hand. If you would prefer to send us a written comment or question via email, please send it to cleantransportation@arb.ca.gov. Whether you are participating in this meeting and want to make a comment vocally or you send us a question or comment, please be sure to share your name and affiliation. Okay, the floor is now open. No hands yet. Are there any emails? Thank you, John. Okay, folks, please keep in mind that we will have additional opportunities for you to make comments or ask questions. There will be multiple breaks to do so. So it doesn't look like we have any at this time. So I think we can move forward for now.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, now we will shift focus to discuss financial sustainability, challenges and needs. We have found that many of the mobility projects funded by CARB face ongoing financial sustainability challenges. Ultimately, we want to fund projects that have lasting community benefits, local ownership, and scalability. However, without the stable financial models, it's hard to maintain services long enough to deliver lasting impact. Addressing both financial sustainability and long-term sustainability is key to building community-rooted clean mobility solutions. In the next few slides, we highlight some of the key financial and operational challenges faced by shared mobility project implementers in equity-focused programs and potential strategies that could help overcome those challenges. Next slide, please. First and foremost, similar to public transit, buses and trains, which depend on ongoing public subsidies, these mobility services will also require ongoing public investments from grants or some other forms of government funding to remain operational. This is especially true in low-income and disadvantaged communities, where services often require higher subsidies to remain accessible and affordable. Long-term sustainability for these projects should be defined by equitable access, continuous community support, and meeting environmental and social goals, and not full financial self-sufficiency. Challenges can look different depending on the type of service, whether it's an electric vehicle car share, bike share, or another models. Each has its own infrastructure needs, operational requirements, and levels of user demand, which all impact financial viability. In the next few slides, we're talking about unique challenges for each mobility service model and possible strategies to overcome those issues. Electric car share services face several financial hurdles that make sustainability a real challenge. First, there is a significant upfront investment, not just for the vehicles themselves, but also for charging infrastructure, insurance, and ongoing maintenance, which can be especially costly for EVs and EV chargers. We've also observed theft and vandalism, like damage or tampering with EV charger stations, graffiti, and stolen parts, which all lead to higher operational costs and disrupt services for communities who rely on them. In the earliest stages, services also often see low usage. In low-income, rural communities, demand may take time to grow, which means fare revenue doesn't cover the operating cost for a while. And because these services aim to be affordable, especially in equity-focused communities, there is limited opportunity to increase revenue through pricing. To stay afloat, these programs typically need ongoing public subsidies, grants, or strong partners like affordable housing providers or universities. There is also a need to explore innovative revenue streams, things like advertising, corporate sponsorships, or integration with public transit fare systems to help increasing user adoption and qualify these programs for additional transportation funding opportunities through regional mobility plans. Next slide. For bike share service, challenges are slightly different. these programs face a unique set of financial challenges. One major issue, which is actually common with EV car share services, especially in dockless systems, is the high risk of theft and vandalism, which can result in significant equipment losses and replacement cost. On top of that, these services have high operating expenses, including insurance, maintenance, and rebalancing within the community. Bikes must be redistributed frequently to match demand, especially for e-bikes requiring charging. Demand also tends to fluctuate seasonally, with usage dropping in colder or rainy months, which impacts overall revenue. And like other equity-focused mobility services, there is a strong need to keep pricing affordable, which limits the ability to recover cost through user fees. To address these challenges, bike share programs often depend on supportive policies like subsidies or fee waivers for low-income riders, and key partnerships such as with public transit and private sector sponsorships can help fill funding gaps. Integrating bike share with local public transit for first and last mile coverage can also drive up demand and, more importantly, reflects its role as an essential part of transportation infrastructure, which can also help build support for continued public investment for these services. Next slide, please. Microtransit services, while flexible and responsive to community needs, face several financial hurdles that affect long-term sustainability. Due to the need for paid drivers compared to other shared mobility services, ongoing vehicle maintenance for larger vehicles, and dispatch and software system, especially those being outsourced to private companies, require a lot of resources. Also, unlike fixed route transit, microtransit often has lower passenger volumes per trip, which drives up the cost per rider. Models with better integration with transit and those with known access points as drop-off and pickup hubs can improve vehicle utilization and reliability, which may result in reducing operation costs and address demand unpredictability. Similar to other service types, fare revenue rarely covers these costs, especially in equity-focused programs where pricing must remain low to stay accessible and affordable for residents. Additionally, the on-demand nature of microtransit makes it harder to predict and optimize routes, leading to less efficient service delivery. In order to remain viable, these services often require consistent public funding, along with supportive policies that promote integration with other transit modes. Partnerships with employers, healthcare providers, or community organizations can help offset cost and expand access. Overall, microtransit offers valuable flexibility, but it comes with a funding model that requires careful planning and diverse revenue strategies. Next slide. In this slide, we want to give an overview of technical assistance available to our grantees to help them build long-term financial resiliency and support them to take proactive steps to sustain their services beyond the grant term. CARB, in coordination with our grantees, including Mobility Administrator, analyzes grantees' financial sustainability plans to identify common gaps and areas where additional support is needed. The administrator team is also holding one-on-one meetings with grantees to strengthen their strategies for sustaining services once grant funding ends. Those conversations are tailored and practical, helping grantees think through real-world challenges. To foster shared learning, we've also launched long-term sustainability work groups within the broader Clean Mobility Equity Alliance, or CMEA network, which bring together operators, partners, and funders to explore solutions and best practices. In addition, we are expanding access to tools and resources through a dedicated financial resources webpage currently hosted on CMO website. The link is available on the slide. Our goal is to make it easier for project implementers to pursue future funding and build practical partnerships by providing them resources such as grant application template and useful partnership toolkit, which these will be available on the website soon. And finally, we encourage communities to explore project types that may be less dependent on ongoing funds, like active transportation infrastructure projects. Next slide, please. In addition to efforts made in-house, as Violet briefly mentioned earlier in our presentation, CARB contracted with researcher at STEER to help us navigate the financial pitfalls of clean mobility programs in the state's rural, marginalized, and low-income communities. The STEER Sustainability White Paper provides a comprehensive look at the funding and financing strategies needed to support long-term viability of clean mobility services, especially in underserved communities. One of the central takeaways from this study is that funding strategies must be customized to reflect local conditions. What works in a dense urban area with strong tax revenue may not translate to a rural or low-income community with limited local funding capacity. Local income levels, governance structures, and infrastructure conditions all play a role in what's financially viable. Importantly, the paper reaffirms that public funding remains essential, particularly in disadvantaged communities. User fees alone rarely cover the full cost of operations, and placing the burden on riders can undermine equity goals. And ultimately, STEER white paper recommends a blended approach combining public grants, private investments, and strong local partnerships to create diversified and stable funding streams. That includes working closely with employers, utilities, community organizations, and local governments. The paper also highlights community-owned co-ops, which allow local residents to share ownership and investment in the service. Next slide, please. We're looking at additional ways CARB can support and help creating the conditions for long-term success for clean mobility projects, not just by funding projects, but by building capacity, partnerships, and visibility across the mobility ecosystem. As mentioned previously, these services will always need some sort of government incentives and public funding to remain viable. And we believe long-term sustainability for these projects should not be defined by their full financial self-sufficiency, but by providing equitable access, having strong community support and impact, and meeting their environmental and social and equity goals. It's critical that we do our best to help grantees get connected to available local, state, and federal funds resources, as well as other creative sources of financing, as many struggle to continue after initial funding ends. Conventional transportation funding programs often do not provide ongoing support for all of the activities needed. And addressing this can require creativity and advanced planning. We're also exploring the possibility of having more flexible encumbrance and liquidation deadlines for our grants to allow projects the time they need to deploy funds effectively. Many grantees operate small community-based programs with limited staff capacity. So rigid timelines can become a barrier to full implementation or scale up. For projects already showing measurable success, whether it's in ridership, community impact, or emission reduction, we may consider reinvestments rather than always starting fresh. Sustaining successful efforts can often be more cost-effective and equitable than launching new pilots. Active transportation infrastructures is another key area. Again, improving bike and pedestrian access around mobility hubs will support not just clean mobility, but also healthier and more connected communities, and they usually do not rely on ongoing funding streams. Finally, we want to empower grantees to tell their stories and advocate for support through trainings and outreach resources as part of our marketing plan. This topic will be covered next. Now I pass it to my colleague Leilani to present an overview of the mobility marketing plan. Thanks.
Thanks again, Ava. We'll now be discussing the mobility marketing plan for the sustainable community-based transportation equity projects. Next slide, please. The mobility marketing plan was developed by Hartquist Strategies, who is part of our current CMO mobility administrator team, to increase awareness of CARB's mobility projects and help communicate the importance of securing funding to maintain these projects' capacity and help support their long-term sustainability. This plan has various target audiences, including local and state elected officials, transportation organizations, non-governmental and community-based organizations, clean transportation grantees within CARB and beyond, tribal communities and government entities, and the general public. The strategies include speaking engagements for CEMIA members on the impact of equitable clean transportation solutions through developing a speaking engagement calendar and providing media training and other resources to prepare members for these opportunities. The plan also includes amplifying social media content through toolkits to help bring awareness to milestones and events, such as the Clean Mobility Forum. Legislative outreach includes toolkits and trainings to help members and grantees in inviting legislature and local elected officials to launch events and other related community events. This ties into continuing to elevate grantee projects' press and launch events. This marketing plan was presented to the CEMIA network on June 11th of 2024 to work through the strategies and collect input on the plan. The meeting and feedback survey results showed a majority positive feedback, with members sharing that many of these tactics were actions they had already been doing or would like to start doing and would appreciate more support and guidance on. The marketing plan strategies will continue to progress throughout the year and beyond. I'll now pass it to my colleague Robert to help facilitate Q&A.
Thank you, Leilani. Okay. If you would like to make a verbal comment or ask a question, please raise your hand. For those of you using Zoom online, please click on the raise hand option on the Zoom navigation bar under the Participants tab. If you are using an updated version of Zoom, you may need to click on the React or Reactions option on the Zoom navigation bar and then click on raise hand. For those of you joining on a mobile platform using Zoom, please click on raise hand option in the More tab. Again, if you are using an updated version of Zoom, you may need to click on the React or Reactions option on the Zoom navigation bar, and then click on Raise Hand. If you are joining by phone, please press #2 to raise your hand. If you would prefer to send a written comment or question via email, please send it to cleantransportationincentives@arb.ca.gov. And whether you are making a comment or a question on this call or via email, please share your name and affiliation when you introduce yourself. The floor is now open. Any emails? Thank you, John. Okay, I just want to remind folks, we will have multiple additional opportunities for providing comments or asking questions. So at this time, I think we're ready to take a break. Let me see here. There we are. We'll see you back here at 10 after 10. Thank you.
All right, it's 10:10 a.m. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a chance to stretch and recharge. And just another reminder that this meeting is meant to be a two-way conversation, and your perspective, um, your thoughts, lived experiences are very valuable to us, and we'll welcome your feedback, your questions on everything we present today, uh, questions, suggestion, concern. Um, and you can either email us, you can email later too, not necessarily right now, or you can share them verbally. Okay, with that, let's jump back in. Michael, we can go to next slide. Thank you. Okay, so CARB has been implementing these pilot mobility projects since 2015, and is continually working to improve and streamline access to funding, either planning or implementation. Over the next few slides, we want to highlight some of the feedback we've heard from stakeholders and applicants, and how that feedback has helped us modify our approaches to better meet the needs of communities. We are interested in getting your feedback on whether these modifications have been helpful, or whether there are other things you want us to consider as we continue to evolve and grow our programs. Next slide, please. Planning and capacity building program, or planning in short, is part of CARB's larger efforts to reduce barriers that make it hard for low-income and disadvantaged communities to access clean transportation options. We created a dedicated funding category because communities ask for more clear, more focused support that fits their local needs and priorities. planning program builds on past projects like Clean Mobility in the School, which helps students get safe, clean transportation to school. Clean Mobility Options, which supports smaller mobility projects and needs assessment. And STEP, which emphasizes flexibility and allowing communities to pursue what works best for them in clean transportation planning. Planning and capacity building program helps communities set transportation goals, build local capacity, and makes it easier to apply for future clean mobility implementation funding. Most importantly, it sets the stage for funding projects designed by communities for communities, helping lay the foundation for clean, sustainable transportation solutions that truly work. Next slide, please. Over the last few years, we have heard from stakeholders and communities that CARB needs to develop strategies on how we plan to prioritize investment to fill gaps in access to clean transportation for tribes, rural communities, Black communities, and other communities of color. We were asked to review how our programs can give adequate priority to helping households and communities that have severe needs using objective criteria. Sorry, I'm waiting for the slide to come back to the right slide. Just not, there you go. Thank you, Michael. Some of our programs have incorporated this focus, and some have utilized like first come first serve method and other approaches intended to make programs easy and quick to access funds. As we study this question, we want to hear your suggestions. We've worked to incorporate equity-focused criteria into our grant selection process, aiming to prioritize communities with significant needs. However, we know there is always room to improve. Today, we would like your input on how we can further refine our approach to better identify and fund communities with the most severe unmet mobility needs. What tools, data, or strategies should we be considering to ensure we're truly meeting communities where they are? In the next slides, we'll review some examples of these criteria we've been considering when selecting projects. Project selection processes vary across CARB's suite of mobility incentive projects, depending on the specific objectives of the funding. All mobility project applicants must meet basic equity criteria that has been outlined in the statute, meaning California law requires CARB's equity projects to prioritize funding to what we call priority populations. Priority populations are defined as disadvantaged and low-income communities as well as low-income households, including tribes. Here, we're highlighting some examples of equity-focused and needs-based criteria we currently use to guide funding decisions for STEP, Clean Mobility in School, and Planning and Capacity Building Program. Across all of our programs, we emphasize strong community grounding, such as requiring that services and infrastructure primarily serve disadvantaged or low-income communities and tribes, and proposals that are clearly responding to transportation needs identified through community engagement, prioritized hard-to-reach residents, and increase access to essential destinations. Projects get points when their intent and focus are to increase transportation equity and access to key destinations, and when they're developed and designed by an equitable community engagement process. Next slide, please. In CMO, We also considered a set-aside guaranteed funding for tribal applicants to ensure that they don't have to compete with larger, more resourceful applicants. Another example of our equity-focused grant application criteria is reducing financial barriers by allowing non-monetary contributions instead of match funding. Altogether, these criteria aim to ensure funding goes to projects that are not only community driven, but responsive to the real transportation challenges residents face. As mentioned previously, at times we have heard stakeholders suggest that our mobility projects should further prioritize funding to communities with the greatest needs using a needs-based approach. CARB would like to better understand what consideration we should include when designing and evaluating projects. Going back to our question on previous slide, we would like your input during our next Q&A section on how CARB can further refine its approach to better identify and fund communities with severe unmet mobility needs. What tools, data, or strategies should we be considering to ensure we're truly meeting communities where they are? With that, I'll pass it to my colleague Laura to talk about some recommended policy changes for our programs. Thank you.
Thanks, Ava. Good morning, everyone. In the next few slides, we'll provide you with staff's proposed changes in project criteria and some updates for each program. On this slide, we'll share a quick update on planning and capacity building and what's coming next. First, there are no policy changes planned for projects already underway. Current projects will continue as expected, while also maximizing flexibility and getting tailored support along the way. Looking ahead, we plan to release a new request for applications this fall. Draft requirements and application criteria were posted yesterday for public and tribal comment, and you can find the link to these materials in the meeting chat. CARB is accepting comments until August 29th. Our priorities for this next round include welcoming first-time applicants with a special focus on tribal and rural communities to help build their capacity. We'll also prioritize schools that are planning their transition to zero-emission transportation and working to support under-resourced students. And finally, if we receive more applications than available funding, we'll use any additional future funds to support eligible projects from this request for applications so more communities can benefit over time. We're proposing some updates to improve how we fund clean mobility projects. For CMO, we're recommending increasing the grant amount beyond the previous $1.8 million cap and shifting from a first-come, first-served model to a more needs-based approach. We also want to clarify that project areas should include at least 51% of census tracts within low-income or disadvantaged communities, and not 100% in disadvantaged communities. We'd also like to extend the grant term to give projects more time to launch and operate effectively. And for CMIS, we're looking to refine how we evaluate student population and demographic criteria to ensure that we're reaching more underserved students in disadvantaged communities. Together, these changes aim to strengthen equity, improve access, and better support long-term success. At this time, STEP has no proposed policy changes. However, STEP will undertake several efforts to inform possible future changes. These efforts include evaluating data from current and past projects, past requests for applications, the final report on the request for applications from our technical assistance provider, and the STEER contract currently in progress, evaluating our coordinated investment approach. We will also review recent research on housing and transportation costs and destination accessibility, and we'll consider studying or conducting additional research as needed, such as research related to the potential for reductions in vehicle miles traveled and patterns of displacement. That concludes this portion of the presentation, and now I'll hand it back to Robert for the Q&A discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. All right, folks. Here we go again. We have question comment forum now. If you would like to make a verbal comment or ask a question, please raise your hand. For those using Zoom online, please click on the raise hand option on the Zoom navigation bar and under the participants tab. If you are using an updated version of Zoom, you may need to click on the react or reactions option on the Zoom navigation bar and then click on raise hand. For those using Zoom on a mobile application, please click on the raise hand option in the more tab. Again, if you are using an updated version of Zoom, you may need to click on the react or reactions option on the Zoom navigation bar and then click on raise hand. If you are joining by phone, please press #2 to raise your hand. If you would like to provide a written comment or question, you may send those to us via email at cleantransportation.arb.ca.gov. And again, a reminder, if you have a comment or question on this call or via email, please make sure you provide your name and your affiliation if you have any. Okay, at this time, I see one hand. Miguel Martinez, I have asked you to unmute. See if you can unmute and go ahead.
Hi, this is Miguel Martinez with Go Power EV. One of the things that we're hearing from multifamily property owners in DAC and low-income communities is they are very much afraid of continuing with EV charging at multifamily residences because of the ending of the federal subsidies for the purchase of EVs. So one of the things that would be really good is CARB putting together information to encourage and inform residents about the lower cost in operating and owning EVs. Also setting up a network of EV used car and new car dealers that would be able to reach into some state funding until federal funding comes back for the purchase of new and used EVs, as well as e-bikes and other e-micro-mobility devices.
Thank you, Miguel. Appreciate the advice and the comment. I do not see any other hands at this time. Do we have any emails, John? No emails. Okay. Deborah Banks, please go ahead and unmute yourself. Hello, Deb.
Hi, nice to see you. Good morning, everybody. I was really interested in taking a quick look. I really want to do a deep dive on some of the research that you all did, but I was just scanning the research report about, it almost seemed like best practices on engaging needs assessment, et cetera, of disadvantaged communities, et cetera. And so I'm curious, to what extent have you taken that research from the othering in UC Berkeley, I believe, and applied it to some of the conversation that we were just having about how to interact with tribal groups and other underserved communities? Just curious if the research has found its way into your practice?
Yes, I can respond to that a bit, and thank you for the question. So we've done many things to try to implement some of the recommendations, mainly in the from the perspective of providing guidance to those implementing projects in their community. So organizations implementing planning capacity building efforts in their community. We really want those projects to be led by those organizations with recommendations based on this report, but also how projects are unfolding in other communities and things that they've uncovered. So some of them do come across as best practices, but really, I think that one of the key messages that OBI was trying to put out there was that, you know, we really need to provide as much flexibility so that whether it's a local government, a tribal government, or a community-based organization that's leading an effort, that they can go about that in a way that makes most sense for that community. And they provided a lot of input as well on how to be more inclusive of certain community members that are often excluded from planning processes. And so again, we try to guide that as much as we can with it in mind that the organizations that are leading these efforts know their communities best. So we're also looking at ways of increasing the opportunity of planning capacity building grants to make them more accessible so that various organizations can plan or conduct needs assessments or engage community members with that particular pot of funding. So I think it's an ongoing effort, and it's something that we're constantly trying to improve upon. So it's definitely things that we're trying to take to heart as much as possible. Do you have more questions, or is that okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Appreciate the question. Good to see you. Rhonda Renfro, please go ahead.
Good morning, Rhonda Renfro here from Club Stride. We're located in Solano, California. Question about the application for the planning and capacity building. I noted that you're encouraging first-time applicants, but I had a question about what that qualifies as. Does that include organizations that may have been subcontractors on another application?
Yeah, I think that absolutely could be the case. Organizations that are eligible include local governments, tribal governments, community-based organizations, and public schools. And so any organization that fits in that as one of those as a lead applicant, and even if you've been a partner on a previous project, I think that actually is something that would work in terms of a first-time applicant, especially if that project that you were partnering on was really to build your own capacity to be able to apply and lead efforts of your own. So I think that's something we're looking at as well. And this is just draft guidance or draft guidelines and criteria at this time. So we are looking for feedback even on that point. If you think that's unclear or you have ideas that improve how this could be more accessible to first-time applicants, those that haven't received funds directly from CARB as a lead applicant or otherwise, I highly encourage you to submit those types of any comments or questions pertaining to that.
Did you have any follow-up, Rhonda?
I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks, Violet. Okay, Miguel, you're up again. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to find out what SABA stands for.
Sacramento Area Bicycle Advocacy Association, I think. Yeah.
Okay, and is there a person that I can follow up with my comment?
Yeah, let me get back to you on that. We'll get back to you before the call is over.
Okay.
Deb, go ahead. Go ahead. Try again.
Trying to, yeah, there you go. Hi, Miguel. I'm Deb Banks. You can find me at deb@sacbike, all one word, .org.
But Miguel, your question about following up on your comment was for CARB, correct? Not for Saba, or was it? Sorry, just want to clarify.
Yeah, I was a little confused too.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm looking for a follow-up from CARB on my comment.
Yep, we're working on it. We'll get back to you before the end of the meeting about who you can contact or who will contact you. Yes, you're very welcome. Thanks, Deb. Okay, I see no other hands at this time. John, do we have any emails? Okay, no emails. Okay. Well, we're going to move on from here. We will have at least one more additional question and comment period. Oh. Deb, did you raise your hand again? I can't see it. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
I did.
For some reason, I can't see it. Go ahead.
In a different question, I'm just curious about, and this is kind of almost to the whole group, about engagement fatigue. We've done engagement in a number of different projects that we've worked on. And we were starting to hear, of course, from some of the people that we talked to, it's like, oh, I'm so tired. So-and-so just asked me the same question 2 weeks ago or last week. And so I'm curious whether or not CARB has come up against this, or ways in which people that might be applying for future capacity building grants, et cetera, with CARB could help manage that. You know, we want to help people, we want to get involved in the communities, and to some extent they're like, I feel like I'm going to the doctor, I'm getting, you know, pushed and prodded all the time. Enough already, just let's get to it. That's a little bit sharp, but if you understand what I mean, there is a fair amount of engagement fatigue out there in some of the communities we want to help and serve, and I'm curious about ways in which CARB has maybe thought about that.
Thanks. Go ahead, Violet.
Yeah, this actually kind of goes back to one of the questions about the OBI report. So one of the things that were that they elevated in some of their findings is that in a nutshell. You know, there's all these questions through surveys and whatnot that are being asked of community members without acknowledging that there may have been some past efforts that already captured some of that information. And so one of the things that we are trying to work on, and this is something that would be part of, you know, technical assistance as part planning capacity building support, is what are some data resources that may contain some of this information, so that when you go to community, you're asking them questions that are specific to things that haven't been collected yet. So we've already, you know, compiled information on maybe it's demographics, or maybe it's past needs, and you're just going, you know, how can we return to community and ask them follow-up questions, or even just explain how that previous feedback was provided. So I think the short answer is that we are thinking about this, and we are trying to develop resources that point to existing data that can support efforts, while not continually returning to community, asking the same questions over and over, acknowledging that we do that some of that information is available. So I think a way of handling this is also just, you know, coming up with innovative ways to return to community. But I guess it's very much an issue that we're seeing across many of our projects, you know, that we're not even getting survey responses because community are so exhausted with surveys or other types of feedback mechanisms. So again, it's another, work in progress, and we're trying to come up with ways to support that very significant issue that we're seeing across the state. So, and I don't know if anyone else here has some additional follow-up or thoughts on this particular question or concern we've heard.
I just want to thank Deborah for this comment and totally agree. As Violet mentioned, we're thinking about how to address that, maybe even in our RFA and solicitation documents that acknowledge that, because I think there is some aspect of trust erosion here as well. Sometimes that communities feel that their time and voice are really not valued. So that's something that we should be considering. And as Violet mentioned, we want to make sure that we coordinate across projects to avoid these kind of duplicative questions and surveys. Again, just thanks for your comment. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Violet. Thanks, Ava. Thanks, Deb. Okay. No other hands raised at this time. Okay, I think we can move on for now. We will have one more Q&A later on.
Great. Thanks, Robert. Thank you again for everyone for your comments and questions. Now we would like to give a quick overview of the state budget timeline and what that means for our funding plan process, and more specifically funding availability this year for clean transportation incentives. Next slide, please. This slide shows the funding plan development timeline, which aligns with the state budget development timeline. June 15 was the constitutional deadline for the legislator to pass the budget. Our funding plan kickoff workshop on June 17 began the official process for us to collaborate to develop the funding plan, with mid-June to mid-August being our main timeline to hold work groups and workshops to discuss draft ideas with you and discuss specific projects or sets of projects. And that's where we are today. Although the main state budget has already passed, it's important to note that we may receive trailer budget bills towards the end of the legislative session. September 12th is when the California legislative year ends in 2025 and is the last day to pass any bills. This deadline is important because it can sometimes impact our funding plan process, since the legislator may pass bills that amend the state budget by adding or removing funds that were previously appropriated. For example, greenhouse gas reduction funds are being negotiated up until the end of the legislative year, and bills can also be passed late that impact program criteria and implementation. We just want to let you know that if mobility programs receive any last-minute funding, we may hold another public meeting in late September to discuss proposed allocations for different projects. Staff write the proposed funding plan and post it to the website, a CARB website, on October 10, when all you guys and interested parties will have an opportunity to review and comment on the plan for 30 days. We'll also hold an evening community meeting on October 21st to discuss the proposed funding plan and answer any questions and listen to the comments. We will present the proposed funding plan and hear verbal comments at the November 20th board meeting. Next slide, please. So a similar slide to this was presented last month in the funding plan kickoff workshop. We've updated and clarified it based on current state budget information to make sure we are all on the same page. So 2 notes. One is that approximately $132 million from the Air Pollution Control Fund for the Hino settlement is for the Clean Truck and Bus Voucher Incentive Programs, or HVIP. And 2, funding from last year's budget that was shifted to the Regional Clean Cars for All program will be prioritized for air districts that have insufficient funds to meet demand. The key takeaway here for our project, mobility project, is that the current budget does not include an appropriation for any of community clean mobility projects we've discussed today. However, it is important to note that even though the state budget for general fund dollars has been passed, as I mentioned in previous slide, the legislator and the governor's office are still negotiating the final budget for the greenhouse gas reduction fund, and they have until the end of the legislative session on September 12th to pass bills that could amend the state budget. So we are operating under the assumption that mobility projects will not receive funding in fiscal year 2025-26, but we want to be ready should the state decide to appropriate funding to these projects in the coming weeks or months. Next slide, please. This slide outlines 2 potential funding scenarios for supporting community mobility projects incentives, including planning and capacity building and implementation projects. In scenario 1, with the funding between 0 and 50 million, we would focus on releasing a planning RFA using prior year funds and any new allocations. We'll continue providing technical assistance and implementation support to existing grantees and may fund either new or ongoing mobility projects, which in that case, if we want to fund 3 of our projects, CMO, Clean Mobility in School, and STEP, the funding would be split evenly across. In scenario 2, if we receive over 50 million, we propose allocating up to 10% or more, if needed, for planning and technical assistance, with the remaining funds again evenly distributed among 3 mobility programs. This would also include a proposed process for streamlined application and administrating a grant. These options aim to balance planning support with implementation readiness and equitable program delivery. Next slide. Now we're shifting our focus on another key part of the 2025-26 funding plan currently in development, the long-term plan for light-duty vehicles and clean mobility projects. This plan is CARB's long-term investment roadmap for clean transportation in the next 3 years, covering both light-duty zero-emission vehicle incentives and the mobility project. Our focus in today's presentation is on the mobility project of this plan. Next slide, please. The long-term plan serves as a roadmap showing how state incentives can help sustain and grow the light-duty zero-emission vehicle market in California and provide solutions at the community level for clean transportation options. It identifies key priority areas for investment and outlines an estimated 3-year funding need for these programs. The long-term plan document includes several key elements. First, an update on California's light-duty zero-emission vehicle market, including a trajectory analysis to reaching 2030 zero-emission vehicle goals. Second, further discussion of achieving a sustainable light-duty zero-emission vehicle technology and market, including vehicle choice diversity, consumer awareness, and the impact of federal policies. Third, a light-duty vehicle affordability analysis, given the current incentive landscape. Next, analysis of 3-year funding need for CARB's light-duty vehicle and clean mobility projects, and a discussion of staff's longer-term vision for these projects. At the end, this write-up serves as the annual supplemental report required by the 2018-19 Budget Act. There will be more information to come on what will be part of this plan in future workshops for the broader overarching funding plan and in future work groups focusing on light-duty vehicle purchase incentives and mobility projects. But for now, if you have any initial thoughts on what you think CARB should include in this long-term plan, we would love to hear your input today during the next Q&A session. Next slide. Our long-term plan update this year for community mobility projects builds partially on past methodologies, which considered historical funding requests, investment gaps, current project needs, and factors like scalability, sustainability, and local capacity. What we've clearly learned is that the demand for these type of services and projects is effectively unlimited, and every dollar we invest, it can be put to use in communities that need clean, affordable, and accessible mobility options. That's why, looking ahead, we are proposing an updated methodology to not only maintain current funding levels, but also identifies what's needed to scale up implementation and expand technical assistance and capacity building. This shift ensures we're not just funding more projects, but setting them up to last and deliver lasting equity, impact, and access in the communities they serve. Next slide, please. This slide outlines potential funding scenarios and how we propose to allocate funds across our clean mobility programs. In each case, we are committed to setting aside at least 10% or more if needed for planning grants, with each planning award at about $500,000. That means we could fund about 20 planning projects if we get something around 100 to 120 million range of funding, 25 planning projects in the 120 to 250 million window, and about 40 projects if we get somewhere around 250 to 400 million range. The remaining funds would be evenly split between STEP, CMO, and CMIS for mobility implementation grants. CMO will likely not fund new projects in the first funding scenarios and will focus on current implementation projects, but STEP would fund new projects and maybe also clean mobility in schools. With those projects costing approximately 10 million each, in the 100 to 120 million range, that supports around 5 to 10 new mobility projects, as well as continuation of existing CMO projects. With 120 to 250 million, we could fund up to 10 to 15 new projects across all 3 mobility programs, and in the 250 to 400 million range, about 20 to 30 new projects across all of our mobility programs, while also offering expansion funds to successful existing grantees if needed. We currently have over 60 mobility projects. This approach ensures balanced investment in planning and implementation in equitable support across our key mobility programs. And with that, we would love your feedback on policy and funding recommendations, in addition to how we can improve on identifying and prioritizing funding based on community needs. Thank you. Back to you, Robert.
Thank you, Ava. Okay. If you would like to make a verbal comment or ask a question, please raise your hand. For those using Zoom online, please click on the Raise Hand option on the Zoom navigation bar under the Participants tab. If you are using an updated version of Zoom, you may need to click on the React or Reactions option on the Zoom navigation bar, and then click on Raise Hand. For those using Zoom on a mobile application, please click on the Raise Hand option in the More tab. If you are using an updated version of Zoom, you may need to click on the React or Reactions option on the Zoom navigation bar, and then click on Raise Hand. If you are joining by phone, please press #2 to raise your hand. If you would like to send us a written comment or question, please send us an email at cleantransportationincentives@arb.ca.gov, which is shown on the slide that you see here. Okay. Also, please, if you are speaking or you're emailing us, please share your name and your affiliation. Also, a quick follow-up for Miguel. Catherine Canepa from our team will, you can reach out to her. I sent you her email. Please let me know at the end if you did not receive that, or you can just give me a thumbs up. Okay, the floor is open. John, do we have any emails? No emails at this time. Okay. Miguel, please go ahead.
Hi, I did receive Catherine's email. Thank you very much. I'm a
welcome.
little confused about a statement, couple statements. It said Clean Cars for All will receive an additional $17 million for fiscal year 2024-2025. Is that a typo? Because fiscal year 2024-25 ended on June 30th.
Who wants to respond to this?
I can take care of that. Hi, this is Lisa McCumber. So it's not a typo. What happened was the budget amended. So, and this happens sometimes where the legislature will amend a budget year while we're in the middle of a budget year. So they amended the current year to make some shifts and adjustments to give additional funding to the Clean Cars for All program from that fiscal year. So the money, because it just happened in June, it's new money that hasn't gone out to the programs just yet. We are in the process of amending grants and getting those dollars out to the appropriate air districts. But it was just a last minute change to the last budget.
So does that mean that the various air districts will be getting additional funding for fiscal year 2025-26?
No. So for 25-26, as of right now, there is no new money appropriated. So the money that is going to the districts is money from last year's budget.
Right, but are they able to spend that money?
Yes, they are. So one of the things that we ensure is in the budget is the ability to encumber the funds. So there's two little processes. One is encumbering the funds, which means that we get it into grant, and the other is liquidating the funds, which means that we've actually spent the money. The money's gone to their intended recipients. And so in this case, when the legislature made this budget change, they added in time for us to be able to encumber the funds. So we have 2 years to get it under grant, although these funds should be under grant really soon, within the coming weeks.
So the funds will be liquidated in 25, 26 and beyond?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. And then I'm a little bit confused about the no proposed funding for fiscal year 25, 26 for mobility project incentives. So that means there will be no mobility project incentives?
Yeah, along the same lines, the legislature has not yet appropriated any funding for the 25-26 budget year to any of the projects we talked about today. And so therefore we have nothing to propose yet. But as Ava explained, the legislature's not quite done with the budget. While they did settle on all of the general budgeting accounts, there is still one big one that is remaining, which is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is funded through the state's cap and invest programs. And that is being negotiated still between the administration and the legislature. And there could potentially be some funding that comes from that. That is typically the pot of funding that supports these projects. But until decisions are made at the legislative level, we have no proposal at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Miguel. Any other comments or questions at this time? Do we have any emails yet, John? No emails. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, folks. I'm going to hand it back off to Ava. Ava.
Thank you, Robert. We will now be moving on to next steps. All right, so as mentioned before, if our projects receive any funding this year, we plan to schedule one more public workshop as part of the overall funding plan process to discuss clean mobility investments right after the last legislative session in September. After the board approves the 2025-26 funding plan in November, we will hold public work groups that will focus on the implementation of projects. We hope that you will continue to engage with us through that process. Dates, times, and topics for those implementation work groups are still to be determined. However, there are anticipated topics related to mobility programs administration and the way that we select projects, expanding technical assistance, and developing equity and success metrics to select funding for expansion. Next slide, please. All right, thank you all for joining us today. I want to remind you of our open door policy, especially for those most affected by our mobility projects. We encourage you to contact us for one-on-one discussion about your needs, concerns, and potential solutions. The link, I think, has been already shared in the chat for our Clean Transportation Incentives email. And if you would like to contact a specific project lead for a mobility project, you can also find their email on this slide. We appreciate your engagement with us in the funding plan process and look forward to collaborating with you this year Again, a reminder to stay up to date. Please subscribe to our listserv. The link will also be provided in the chat to subscribe. It was my pleasure facilitating today's meeting, and you all have a great day. Thank you.